Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. What we're looking at today is honestly like a real-life cinematic thriller taking place back in the 1960s and 70s. It's the story of how just a handful of renegade filmmakers completely shattered the illusion of a utopian socialist society, and man, they paid a devastating price for doing it. We're going to explore a movement that was so potent, so deeply provocative, that it forced a government to quite literally lock art away in concrete vaults.
So how exactly did a handful of directors terrify an entire government? Well, that question right there is kind of our Trojan horse today, because while this might start off as an explainer about movies and film history, it's actually about authoritarianism. It's about what happens when the terrifying power of the truth goes up against a state that relies entirely on a carefully manufactured narrative. You see, when you give artists a camera, sometimes they point it at the exact things you desperately want to hide.
To really understand just how high the stakes were here, consider this. By 1971, the state's response became completely unprecedented. For the first and literally only time in Yugoslav history, a filmmaker was actually sent to prison. And his crime? Well, he was a young film student who created something incredibly risky. He essentially reworked wartime propaganda into this pointed political satire. He didn't pick up a weapon, he just put something up on a screen. That is the intense kind of fear we are talking about here. Chapter 1. The Spark of Rebellion.
Now, what's really interesting here is how a massive geopolitical earthquake accidentally created a loophole for dangerous artistic freedom to grow. Back in 1948, Yugoslavia's leader, Tito, made a huge move. He broke away from Stalin's Soviet Union. And because of this massive split, the cultural grip on the country loosened just a tiny bit. Fast forward to the 1960s, and this loosened grip allowed a brand new generation of young directors to emerge. They were suddenly walking onto sets and right out into the streets of Belgrade, armed with handheld cameras and a completely fresh perspective.
Chapter 2. Filming the Real Yugoslavia.
So we start seeing this massive clash of realities. On one side, you had the state's officially approved story. It was all about happy workers, heroic partisans, and idealized propaganda. A flawless socialist machine. But these young directors, they had absolutely no interest in that. They wanted to capture the black wave reality. They started filming the drifters, the unemployed, the deeply disillusioned. Basically, these were the exact people the state preferred to pretend didn't exist at all. These directors wanted to show the raw, gritty cracks in the system.
And here are the main architects of this massive reality check. Between 1965 and 1967, they were making some of the boldest cinema Europe had ever seen. Dušan Makavejev's Man is Not a Bird openly portrayed a lonely, alienated engineer who was actually questioning the socialist system. Then you had Živojin Pavlović's Love Affair, which totally blindsided the censors with its tragic comedy, sudden death, and just stinging irony. And Aleksandar Petrović's I Even Met Happy Gypsies did the unthinkable at the time. It portrayed the marginalized Romani community with genuine dignity and warmth, totally pushing back against the state-approved caricature.
Chapter 3. The State Strikes Back. And this brilliantly illustrates the ultimate terrifying irony of having international success under an authoritarian regime. In 1967, these filmmakers are getting massive acclaim at the Cannes Film Festival. The international community is absolutely applauding work that officials back in Belgrade are quietly starting to despise. Then, in early 1969, a film about disillusioned revolutionaries wins the prestigious Golden Bear at the Berlin International Film Festival. It's a massive triumph, right? But within weeks, that exact same film is banned back at home for exposing the huge gap between Marxist ideals and the actual Yugoslav reality. Winning abroad basically painted a giant target right on their backs.
This entire backlash really culminated in a single 1969 headline from the Borba newspaper, "A Black Wave in Our Cinema." And this singular headline did what no rubber censor's stamp could ever do. It invented a label. It was originally meant as a stinging insult by the media, but the government immediately realized its utility and just weaponized it.
Black Wave very quickly became an official bureaucratic label. By October 1969, the ruling party was literally holding closed tribunals in smoke-filled rooms to deal with quote-unquote problems in Yugoslav cinematography. They decided that certain films were counter-revolutionary, so now these officials had a single umbrella term to point at. Any film they deemed too dark, too critical, or too dangerous was slapped with the Black Wave label, and that was exactly the excuse they needed to stop these filmmakers in their tracks.
This quickly evolved into a remarkably cold and efficient system, a literal anatomy of erasure.
First, they would publicly and politically denounce the film. Then they would quietly swoop in and seize the original negatives. And finally, the director would be blacklisted. So it wasn't just about stopping one single movie. It was a highly organized bureaucratic machine designed to completely extinguish the entire artistic movement as we head into the really dark early days of the 1970s.
The ultimate climax of this systemic censorship arrived in 1971. One acclaimed director pushed the boundaries further than anyone else had dared. His film mixed documentary, raw satire, and sexual politics into something so incredibly provocative that the state denounced it as an outright insult. The result? The film was banned for 16 straight years, the director was effectively erased overnight and forced to leave the country. Just think about that. A career built on massive international triumph was simply deleted at home.
Chapter 4. Buried, but not forgotten.
Now we get to the aftermath, during what became known as the 1972 bunkering. The government began quietly rounding up the original negatives of dozens of feature films and shorts. They literally wheeled them into cavernous underground storage rooms, locking them away behind these heavy concrete vault doors. Unseen, unofficial, and while maybe not strictly banned on paper, they were buried all the same. The directors were exiled or simply banned from working, and in the vacuum they left behind, the state funded a brand new movement, the Red Wave. This was highly approved cinema that glorified the partisans, the war heroes, and the exact, pristine version of history the government had always wanted told. The contrast is honestly chilling.
So I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought. If a government buries the truth in a concrete vault, how long until it digs itself out? Because the reality is, these buried black wave films did not stay hidden forever. They sat in the dark for nearly 2 decades, and it was only after Yugoslavia itself began to unravel in the 1990s that modern archivists finally pried open those doors, and sunlight hit those reels again. The world finally rediscovered what these directors had risked absolutely everything to say, proving the enduring power of art and the ultimate futility of censorship. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What else is currently locked away in a vault out there, just waiting for the right moment to see the light of day?